السلام عليكم ورحمة الله تعالى وبركاته أعزائي المشاهدين في حوارية المتجددة من دولة جنوب أفريقيا. معنا الأستاذ البرفيسور محمد طارق خان، أحد أعمدة الهندسة الكهربائية في جامعة سي بي يو تي وكيب تاون. كذلك لديه أكثر من 100 بحث منشور حول العالم. وهو عضو استشاري في عدة شركات وجهات رسمية في جنوب أفريقيا، ويعد من أحد أعضاء الاتحاد الدولي لمقيمي جنوب أفريقيا. بداية دكتور محمد خان، حدثنا عن دولة جنوب أفريقيا قبل وبعد الرئيس نيلسون مانديلا. Tell us about South Africa before and after Nelson Mandela.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Um, yes, South Africa was uh, under the grip of a very oppressive apartheid system, a system in which the white minority ruled virtually everything in terms of the economics, the politics, and the uh, lifestyle, including who to marry, who not to marry, where to get educated and where not to get educated, down to the level of having separate educational systems for different race groups, which was separated according to a grand apartheid plan. So it had a very oppressive system. Uh, 90% of the country was owned by the white minority, with around 10% of the country as allocated Bantustans, small enclaves in which the majority of the people of the country were forced to live.
Yeah,
Um, and these enclaves were policed with their own uh, rulers, what we call Bantustan rulers. These were rulers that were uh, sort of semi-elected over those people, but falling under the South African regime. It has a lot of parallels with what is happening currently within the Middle East, in the West Bank and Gaza. Very,
yeah,
very, very similar situation.
yeah,
So, and that is why the people will often say that it is an apartheid state, which is the current Israeli one. Um, After the um, eventual freeing of President Nelson Mandela, the situation improved quite a bit. In fact, we could say this was a landmark occasion. Nelson Mandela's freeing and the eventual passing of power, political power, to the black majority, which is the indigenous majority of South Africa, including the Kamisa or the Khoi people and their descendants, which were now benefiting under the new dispensation of being free. Um, so the country embarked on a policy of progress under the new democratic dispensation,
yeah,
where everybody had the ability to vote and everybody had the ability to at least choose aspects of the political system which was going to govern them.
yeah,
So that is the improvements after Nelson Mandela's release. South Africa was a democracy in which people were having the ability to vote and the ability to make some decisions,
yeah.
whereas before they had none of those decision-making power.
Yeah. دكتور بروف محمد خان، عانيت الويلات منذ صغرك، وقد كان جدك أحد الأشخاص الذين تم اعتقالهم وجلبهم من الهند. ما أن ترعرع أبوك حتى تم نفيه عن طريق القوى الغربية إلى أمريكا كنوع من العبيد، فترعرعت في اليتم مع والدتك، ولكن مع ذلك تم الاستمرار في الدراسة حتى وصلت إلى هذه المرحلة. وكان نعلم أن 20% من سكان جنوب أفريقيا أي أكثر من 220 مليون نسمة ليس لديهم أي وظيفة. كيف ترى الشركات متعددة الجنسيات وتدخلها بقوة في جنوب أفريقيا؟ فهل هي عودة للاستعمار بالقوة الناعمة؟ يا سكند كوتشي.
Yes. How do you see multinational companies and their strong interference in South Africa? Is it the return of colonialism with soft power? Yeah. Look, multinational companies have existed within the apartheid regime already and have been part of South Africa for a period of time until, of course, the boycott action internationally forced a lot of them to withdraw. And when they actually withdrew, they were replaced by companies which operated in some form or other uh, uh, and continued the under the rules, the international company withdrew, but was replaced by a local subsidiary which continued the same
Yes.
product manufacturing. So they didn't actually lose out
Yeah.
under that particular dispensation.
Yeah.
So, in a way, multinational companies have not really left. They have just, under subterfuge, continued in a different way. Uh, and so one cannot say that they are returning in a different way under colonialism. I would say that they have not really left at all.
Yeah.
They are just now capable of being existing more freely, more openly.
Yeah.
Which is interesting because even under the apartheid regime, multinational companies had certain rules which was beneficiation within the South African context of the regime itself. Whereas after, in the more democratic dispensation, multinational companies actually had a bit more freedom to act with more impunity than they
Yeah.
actually did before. So that was some of the interesting fallouts of the democratic dispensation. They were capable of floating on the international stock exchange instead of the Johannesburg Stock Exchange. So suddenly you found that a lot of multinational companies and a lot of companies that were even local companies which had external roots and external um, uh, branches floated themselves on the London Stock Exchange and the US Stock Exchange. And one could almost say that it was a capital flight in one sense, but maintaining a legitimate presence within the country.
Yeah.
So, so those were some of the things which were different. So I wouldn't say that it is a return of colonialism. I would say that it is an extension of an old methodology. And of course, this was in the wake of South Africa not having yet established
Yeah.
a viable local indigenous black majority controlled industry.
Yeah. إذا كيف ترى تجمع بريكس والذي هو قطب آخر مقابل الناتو؟ هل له دور في استقرار المجتمع الدولي أم أمريكا ما زالت تمتهن الأحادية في تحكم العالم، في تدمير العالم، في رفع سعر الدولار وتدمير القوى الاقتصادية للدول؟
Yes, your third question in this case would be how do you see the BRICS grouping? Is it another pole? Is it an opposition to NATO? I wouldn't say that BRICS is in opposition to NATO. I would say that BRICS basically is uh, the new dispensation which was already foreseen as the process of de-dollarization, which sort of was predicted, and in fact, even coined. The term was even coined by Goldman Sachs somewhere in the early 2000s. It was seeing where naturally the migration of production and extension of power is going. It is going in the direction of Russia, uh, China, and India. And of course, the southern states, which were most powerful in that arena, would be Brazil and South Africa within that context. But I'd like to maybe just extend this into a definition of if we're looking at Russia as part of the BRICS nations. Halford McKinder
Yeah,
is considered as the father of geopolitics, and he identified the heartland of the world as Russia.
yeah,
An interesting thing.
yes,
At the peak of his life, he said the foundation for geopolitics in the West, in the big-headed effort to rule the world, was who rules Eastern Europe commands the heartland, and who rules the heartland commands the world island, and who rules the world island commands the world.
yeah,
So there's an intrinsic shift towards the the Russian, Indian, Chinese axis already, and so one cannot say that it is an opposition to NATO. It is the natural extension of world capital power
yes,
moving in a new direction. Um, um, so it is uh, the old giving way to the new, uh, rather than an opposition. Uh, One can basically see in a geopolitical scale, um, the fight in this case would be more to control the center, which is the Levant.
yeah.
But that's another
He
analysis.
make balance for the war.
Yeah, the Levant, control of the Levant is going to be the last way in which the so-called NATO countries,
Yeah,
um, with its axis being the US, um, can actually control its grip on the world,
yeah, yeah,
which is leading to the current instability in the region.
yeah, good. نعم. تم تدمير العراق بحجة وجود أسلحة الدمار الشامل، وتدمير أفغانستان بحجة نشر الديمقراطية، وتدمير الشرق الأوسط بحجة حماية المدنيين وتداول على السلمي على السلطة. فهل هذا استعمار بأيدي محلية؟ كيف ترى ال- الربيع العربي وأكذوبة أمريكا حول أسلحة الدمار الشامل الموجودة في العراق، ثم ثبت كذبها، وكذلك أفغانستان وكذلك الصومال من قبل. فهل هذا استعمار حديث بأيدي محلية؟
Yeah, yes, to some extent, one can say that the uh, the invasion of Iraq, in which major Western powers themselves now admit was for nefarious reasons. It was not for weapons of mass destruction. It was uh, an extension of a global oil war. It was an extension of, for those who um, would like to see an interesting take on this from, I think it was uh, either Oliver Stone or one of these directors, which made a movie called Vice, in which an analysis was on the vice president, Dick Cheney, who was vice president to um, the George Bush Jr.
Yeah,
And the real authority in the United States was in that case in the hands of business people like Dick Cheney and Donald Rumsfeld and parties like that, with the rise of Halliburton, which thought nothing of obliterating a state in order to rebuild it and reap the profits from that. And of course, it was very clear that the destruction of that was to secure an oil uh, um, an oil basis uh, in the Middle East
Yeah.
for the United States and of course its allies and to secure that. So there's various other aspects. There's pipelines that was going to be built and other things. And of course, the war led in its way to its natural outcome. One cannot continue such a war for too long. It's an imperial war. And the Afghanistan one, in a similar way, the, uh, the pipelines that was going to be blocked in the invasion of Afghanistan, the continuation of that process of making the Pakistan region unstable because of that access to the sea. And of course, the large role that the Iranians are playing within the region as not playing ball with the current system which are in power. So, yes, in both cases, the futility of that was that although the Taliban was fought for more than 20 years, eventually the Taliban is back in power.
Yeah.
And ultimately, it did not lead to anything other than an extreme amount of death and destruction for the profits of a few, which were going to make a lot of money out of the process. Did it benefit the world? No. Did it benefit some industries within those countries? Yes. And this is another form of colonialism, which is not the colonialism of countries or nations, but the colonialism of the business entities. And I'd like to just draw attention to that.
Yeah.
Although colonialism uh, ends up being the armed forces of nation states or kingdoms that march along to take possession and plant flags, although that is one aspect of colonialism. The other aspect of colonialism is that it was actually started by private companies, and private companies uh, did this act of private companies did this act of financing colonialism in a rather uh, vicious way. In the South African context, for instance, the colonization of Southern Africa was under a company called the VOC, and the VOC was responsible for building the castle in Cape Town.
Yeah.
Uh, and later it was colonized by the Dutch, which sent their armies and their people. But a corporate entity, a private corporate entity, was the reason for that colonization. So this we mustn't forget that private corporate entities and colonization goes hand in hand, just as in the case with Iraq, with Halliburton and other companies that was involved in the initial extraction of wealth and the rationale for the invasion. The same thing happened in the past, right from the beginning of the spice trade.
نعم، في جهة أخرى بروف خان، أكثر من شهرين وغزة تدمر بأسلحة الغرب وبأيدي الصهاينة، والعالم كله في حالة صمت وسكون. كيف ترى هذا الصمت من وجهة نظرك؟
Yes, the Gaza issue. Um, I think the the case of Palestine is perhaps on the world scale. And there are some who say that this is different because for the first time now, the Israeli boot is seen very clearly as the vicious one,
Yeah.
whereas in the past it was very well covered up and it was not as open and as blatant as it is now. Is their guard down? One doesn't know. Or is this their last resort for them to maintain power within the American hegemony of the Levant area? Um, Maybe that is the reason for the slip up. But certainly it has been very blatant and has therefore caused a lot of reaction in the world. A lot of people have actually woken up to the plight under which Palestinians live for a long time and have now finally begun to see what this is about. But in terms of the Muslim lands, I would say that for 75 years there have been this regular thing. When come Ramadan, there's an attack on Masjid al-Quds, there is some killing, there is some fighting every year. So if that continues for too long, it becomes a pattern. And when it becomes a pattern, you start ignoring it. You start, it becomes fuzzy and you ignore it. So in a lot of cases, the Palestinian issue has been going on for so long that people actually become desensitized to it. But yet the current vicious atrocity that has happened has actually woken people up, has actually made people see that this is not something that can just be ignored. Um, I would view the current Israeli uh, action in the region as a war, not as a genocide. But remember that not all genocide is a war, but all wars can lead to genocide. So, in this case, this is a war. The question is, what is this war for?
Yeah.
And this war is clearly to take charge of the Levant area. This war is bigger than Gaza. This war is bigger than the freedom of Palestine.
Yes.
This war is to take control of the Levant area itself. Um, and sadly to say, I would be uh, lax if I were to not ask a single question around, if one do ask this question concerning the lack of action by the Muslim states in the region, one has to ask also the lack of action by one of the big neighbors that has been very vicious in fighting and leveling cities to the ground, Syria.
Yeah.
Um, why Syria is itself, with its arsenal of air support and with its arsenal of war for quite a long time now, not able to be a little bit more vocal and even allowing the Golan Heights to be just taken is a question that one has to really look at. Um, and, 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 and it is not, for me, very clear why that is happening. But at the same time, one must not forget that almost 500,000 people have been killed in the Syrian war. We are talking about 20,000 people, 21,000 people currently in Gaza,
Yeah.
but 500,000 people have been bombed out of existence in exactly the same way with barrel bombs from a neighbor, which is very quiet with regards to Israel.
Yeah. وهل هذا الهجوم على غزة له علاقة ونتيجة بما أتى به الربيع العربي وكيف تم تدمير الدول العربية كل على حدة؟ فهل ترى أن الربيع العربي آتى ثماره وحقق أهدافه؟
Yes, of course, the Arab Spring and the associated fallout of that. Um, was it really a spring or was it an anticipated event that played into the hands greater and more far-reaching global events. So yes, certainly, if one were to believe that the Second World War was started because of a count, or the First World War because of the Archduke Ferdinand that was killed, and so forth, uh, uh, then that is preposterous because in reality that's not the reason why the First World War was started, but that is very often given as a popular reason. And the uh, the Arab Spring could be said started because a person from Tunisia was very frustrated and could not have work. And when he killed himself, everybody else was up in arms over it. Yes, that might well be a potential reason, but I don't think that is the ultimate reason. That the fact that there was uh, possibly social engineered uh, events at play as well as spontaneous action cannot be ignored because it led to a number of regime changes and it led to an enormous amount of instability in the region as well. And one ultimately has to see who did it benefit. And if one looks at it today, one would see that it gave rise to certain powers that are keenly associated with the normalization of politics and with the Zionist state. And one has to ask oneself, is that really in favor of Muslims? And hopefully, the current events in Gaza and the current wake-up call would have a lot of our Muslim powers realize that that was an erroneous decision to think of normalization with the Zionist state, because ultimately the Zionist state will not want to have anything normalized other than itself being at the top of that food chain in control of the region.
نعم. وأخيرا، آه، هل لديك معلومات حول ليبيا؟ ماذا تعرف عن ليبيا إن كنت تعرف فأخبرنا عنها. Finally, when do you have any information about Libya? Tell us about it.
Well, I cannot say um, that I have an enormous amount of information about the current state of Libya, but I could say the following in that since my youth,
In the past or
in the
present?
past, I grew up with Mustafa Akkad's Lion of the Desert.
Yes, yes,
And
yes.
of course, the stories that was
Yeah.
sponsored by the colonel himself,
And message.
yes,
Yeah.
and of course the message.
Yes.
But I would say the impression was with the Lion of the Desert, which had everything. It was um, an incredible film, which brought a lot of the what is the
Omar
Algerian,
al-Mukhtar like Nelson Mandela.
yes,
Yeah.
the Italian, not the Italian, the Algerian philosopher, what is his name, that wrote White Skin, Black Faces. Um, I can't get to his name now, but uh, very famous. But so this was very typical of what one would also have experienced in the Algerian War
Yes.
of independence. So
1.5 million.
yes,
Yeah.
so
Yeah. Killed
it brought
the
that
French.
fight against the colonialists out
Yes.
very clearly. So I think in that way, my impression expressions of Libya has always been as the land of the lion of the desert, land of lions, and the place of um, during the Gaddafi era, it was seen as a place that people could find some sort of political support from. Um, Now, no ruler in any world is 100% perfect, and one certainly wouldn't put that on any ruler as having been that. But certainly there has been a number of positive things which came from that past, and also the heritage and history of Libya. One wishes that the Libyan people will see eye to eye and unite uh, together in order to create a strong uh, and a unified face to the world so that it can regain and maybe even surpass and become more glorious than what it has been in the past. And certainly Libya has been this country which inspired many. It has been from the ancient days, from the Roman eras to today, a force within the Mediterranean. And I think that is where it must take up its path, go to become that great force within the Mediterranean and unite its people and become a big power within the region.
Yeah. Uh, did you make supervision about Libyan student in university؟ هل أشرفت على العديد من الطلبة الليبيين في جامعة؟
An enormous amount, yes, quite, quite, quite a bit. I've had quite a number of Libyan students, and I must say, wonderful people, very studious, very hardworking, and I never had any one of those students ever present to me a kind of factional issue. I've never asked them about it. I've not said, are you a supporter of this or a supporter of that? They've always presented themselves as hardworking and wanting to contribute to their nation and wanting to make and take things further. And so I've had a number of students that I can only say have done well, and I wish them all the best and wish that they would do well for their nation.
Yeah. Thank you Prof خان for interview. أعزائي المشاهدين والمتابعين، كانت هذه حوارية مع البروفيسور محمد طارق خان من جمهورية جنوب أفريقيا. حتى نلتقي في مقابلة أخرى، أستودعكم الله والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله تعالى وبركاته.
وعليكم السلام.